I see so many familiar faces, but for those of you I haven't met before, yes, I'm Emily. I'm Wagestream's Chief Impact Officer. And kind of in my remit of measuring impact, managing impact, understanding how it flows through to society, I own our program of academic research. And within that program of research, that includes our workplace savings opt-out research trial. And this Downing Street briefing is really about how we can unlock a dramatic change in trajectory for the financial well-being for the UK workforce as a whole. I'm really serious here. We can really change the course of their financial well-being. And I have the panel who can make it happen with me. I'm joined today by Sarah Holmes-Burke, Research Project Director for Harvard University and the National Bureau of Economics Research. We also have Alice Martin, Head of Research for the Work Foundation, that has a heritage stretching back over 100 years. She's been researching the labour market for over a decade. And what's really exciting for us today is she's the lead analyst on the government's new bill that came out today. So she's going to give you some really exciting insight on the new employment rights bill. And although you cannot see her, Tulip Siddiq is joining us digitally. So Tulip Siddiq is the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, City Minister and MP in a local constituency as well. She's also a really big advocate of workplace savings. And before I hand over to my panel for the great conversation we're going to have, I'm going to take moderator's privilege. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to join a few dots for everybody today. Today is a big day, right? And not just inside the Ham Yard Hotel. So we've got the new employment rights bill came out today, 28 changes to workers' rights, the biggest change in employment rights since 1998 when the national minimum wage was introduced, really meaningful change that creates much stronger financial stability for workers. And from that financial stability, we can grow financial well-being. It's also World Mental Health Day. I don't know if you knew that. And the theme this year is workplace mental health. And we know how important financial health is to mental health, so kind of connecting that dot for you as well. If you were lucky enough to be here this morning, and you saw Owen Service from COGCO unveil our new Financial Wellbeing Index, and one of the really interesting insights from that index was that income itself wasn't really moving the needle on financial well-being. So we're going to kind of dig beneath that and see, well, what is making a difference for people? And then the last big deal moment for today is in your goodie bags when you go home, you're going to get a copy of our new 2024 State of Financial Wellbeing research report that I co-authored with Owen from COGCO. And I want to share two gaps. There was two gaps we found. The first gap we found in that research is what we're calling the empathy gap. And this is the tendency for higher earners to substantially underestimate how savvy and resilient lower earners are. And when I say substantial, I mean substantial. They thought they had half as much money left at the end of each month, a third of the amount of savings they actually do. They thought they worried twice as often as money as in reality, and they thought they missed out 3 times as much on social and recreational activities. So a really big underestimation of how well lower earners are coping, managing scarce resources, and actually living a really full life. And I want to put some numbers behind this for you in terms of what is a higher earner and what is a lower earner. And I grabbed some data from April RTI, so real-time information filings. So in April of this year, the start of the new tax year, 37.7 million people got paid. Pretty cool, right? 37.7 million people got paid. Of those 37.7 million, 29.5 million, that's 78.8%, are basic rate taxpayers. 78.8% are earning $37,700 or less. Okay? Take a moment to reflect on that. If you earn about £43,000 a year or more, you are in the top 25% of earners in the UK. If you earn about £65,000 a year or more, you are in the top 10%. So you might not have been sitting here before I gave you those numbers, thinking of yourself as a particularly high earner. But again, if you are earning more than a basic rate taxpayer, if you're earning beyond $37,700, you are in the minority of people in the UK, and you need to carry that knowledge through to the policies you design and the benefits you procure on behalf of the majority. That's the first important gap, the empathy gap. The second gap is the action gap. And here's where it got really interesting. Everybody was able to articulate the behaviors they should be doing. Everybody knows they should be saving. The significant majority of people, 92%, agreed that putting 10% of your pay into a savings account each month was a good idea. When you find out who's doing that, a gap opens up. 73% of higher earners are doing that, and just 23% of lower earners are doing that. Now, you might be tempted to think this is an affordability or capability point. And again, I refer you back to that empathy gap. Do not underestimate your people, because that gap persists in other behaviors. That persists across budgeting and planning. That persists across negotiating better prices from service providers. And that persists across even items like selling things you no longer need to come up with some spare cash. Higher earners do it much more than lower earners do it. But, and here's the magical thing, when you look at which behaviors are driving financial well-being, a regular savings habit is a leading indicator of well-being regardless of income. It neutralizes income. So if you can take people from knowing to doing, you can make a really significant change to their financial circumstances. And I'm going to make a kind of grandiose statement here. And I'm going to say, we are entering a new era of workplace financial well-being. Gone are the days of financial capability and financial education, and here are the days of financial action. We are here to take financial action. The Money and Pension Service has set a goal in their financial wellbeing strategy for 2030 of 2 million new savers in the UK by 2030. We know that in this room, we can make that happen. We represent more than 2 million frontline workers in this room. We have the capability, we have the will, and frankly, we have the panel to get us there. And I want to open up the panel by hearing from Tulip Sadiq, Economic Secretary, on her thoughts on what's coming next.
Hello everyone, I would very much have liked to be with you all in person today, and I'm so sorry I couldn't make it. But I was still keen to provide a few words in support of Wagestream's Financial Wellbeing Forum, and I'm grateful to be able to do that virtually. I am really pleased that this event is taking place for the second year running, and I'm passionate about increasing financial well-being. And as Economic Secretary, I'm excited about the role that innovation and fintechs can play. One of my top priorities is building financial resilience and well-being. And one of the big keys to success here is working with industry to find innovative means of doing so. By expanding access to financial services and pioneering new ways to support underserved customers, you can help us deliver our vision of enhanced financial well-being across the UK. This is especially valuable in one particular area, improving individual and household resilience through increasing savings. The facts here are stark. A quarter of adults have less than £100 in their savings account, and 1 in 6 with no savings at all. This leaves many people in an incredible vulnerable position where an economic shock like loss of income can have a huge impact on their lives. And that's why it's more important than ever to be thinking of innovative ways to help individuals to boost their savings and build their financial resilience and well-being. A great example of this is the work that Wagestream and many of you gathered here today have been taking forward on workplace savings and exploring new ways that make it easier for individuals to save. When we're taking a comprehensive approach to individuals' financial well-being, the role of employers is crucial, and I would like to thank you all for your work to date in considering this. It's also great to see so many innovative ideas in this space, with budgeting and education tools giving individuals greater understanding, control, and peace of mind with their finances. The last thing I want to mention is our work to improve financial inclusion, an issue I know Wagestream has recognized and advocated for in its research. Everyone should be able to benefit from financial products and services which suit them, but many people aren't able to. As such, the government is currently taking steps to understand barriers to financial inclusion in more detail. And I am absolutely committed to considering what more can be done and recognizing the enabling role of employers already touched on today. I will ask those in attendance to consider what part their organizations might play in this as well. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy the rest of the forum, and I look forward to hopefully crossing paths with many of you in the months ahead as we work together towards the collective goal of improved financial well-being for all.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely deserves a round of applause, because what a powerful statement from Tulip Sadiq. What clear commitment to investing in understanding financial inclusion and financial well-being. And I can think of no one better to guide that understanding than Sarah Holmesburg. We've been working together for about 2.5 years. So that's how I remember the age of your daughter, on this piece of research into a really simple question, which is what happens when you flip the default on workplace savings. And I would love it if you could take a few minutes to step us through the highlights of what you've found over those last couple of years.
Yeah, thank you. And before I start doing that, I would just want to take a minute to pause and thank all of you for being here. I joke with Emily a lot that I get to do sort of the fun part of all of this, which is analyzing a super rich data set that she updates. It's super high frequency, and I get to learn a lot of really interesting things with the rest of my team at Harvard. But it's such a privilege to be here with all of you who are clearly so invested in improving financial well-being for your own employees. I've gotten to know a couple of the employers that are represented here, Bupa and Co-op and Suez, over the course of this research that I'll talk about. But clearly everyone here is really invested in this topic, and it's very moving as an outsider to see that. So thank you all for being here today. As Emily mentions, we've been working together for about 2.5 years, but I've been working on this for about 8 years. With Nest Insight, we initially tested this idea of workplace savings, payroll-linked savings on an opt-in basis with 5 employers. That started in 2017, and the results surprised us. Over 3 years of data collection, no more than 1.5% of eligible employees took up the savings product. The ones that did take it up, saved a lot over the months that they were in the account, but 1.5% is not doing a lot to move the needle on the average employee's financial well-being. And we were also concerned that the people who found the time to sign up for this product were not the people that were most financially excluded. So that's when we started looking at ways that we could reach more people. We knew that automatic enrollment could be a really powerful tool. We'd seen it work in the pensions context here in the UK, and also in the US, our 401k plans have automatic enrollment at many employers. But it was a new thing to try and get employers on board with using automatic enrollment to increase short-term savings. The results have been shocking. We thought it would work. We wouldn't have tried it if we didn't think it would work, but it worked even better than we expected. In both the Wagestream RCT randomized control trial that we've run and in a separate study that we've run with Suez, we've gotten about a 48 percentage point lift in participation in these programs. So in the Wagestream studies, we are comparing people who get sort of business as usual or a gentler nudge called active choice to people who are automatically enrolled into payroll savings when they sign up for Wagestream. Those first 2 groups, it fluctuates, but no more than 20%, typically between 10 and 15% of members are saving. And then in the opt-out automatic enrollment arm, participation is in the upper 60, like 65 to 70% of members, which is incredible. And I'll pause there and say, you might be wondering, how can we get to 100%? But keep in mind that many of your employees already do have access to savings tools. So the 65, 70% feels really, really good. It feels like we're reaching a lot of the people that we would need to reach. We're automatically enrolling members at a £40 default. that happens to be, and they're all getting paid once a month, so it's £40 a month. That happens to be about 2% of pay for the average worker at the participating firms, which felt small enough to not scare people away, right? If your default is £300 a month, a lot of people are just going to say, nope, that's not for me. So you need something that feels attainable, feels like something that they can do, but you also want it to be high enough that they can build up a real buffer. So this would allow somebody to get close to 500 pounds over the course of a year. And we're seeing that people really stick at that default. In the opt-out arm, way more than half of people who are saving are sticking at the 40-pound default. And in general, people who aren't sticking there are increasing it up to 100 pounds a month. So people are able to use the product, they're able to save, they're building significant balances. 9 months after randomization, we're seeing that average balances in the automatic enrollment arm are about 120 pounds higher than in the other two arms that I described earlier. And those are unconditional balances, so there's zeros mixed in. Lots of zeros in the control and active choice arms, but also some zeros in the opt-out arm as well. When you focus only on people who are actually saving, the differences are more dramatic in some ways. The opt-out arm is exceeding 200 pounds by month 9 after randomization, which that can cover a lot of negative shocks. It can cover all sorts of small household expenses that might have put somebody in a real jam before, but which suddenly now they can instantly access the funds and feel like they're in a much more secure place. There's a lot more to the program, but maybe I'll pause there and we can talk about the other bits later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, it's been such a huge success, success beyond what we had ever thought was possible. And what's been so interesting has been that the nudge, kind of prompting people to save, just was wholly ineffective. You really had to help people take action, and that once you helped them take action, they had the capability. They expressed how much they were grateful for that they didn't think they could save, but now they were a saver. And we're kind of moving into a new way of thinking about and managing money. Alice, I want to come to you. So, the Work Foundation in its 100 plus years of sort of think tankery and kind of labour market analysis, actually quite recently there's been a big focus on insecure work. And I've heard the Labour government quoting a lot of Work Foundation stats and some of what they've been doing. And it feels like the flavour of the new employment rights bill is all about financial stability. So although it's workers' rights that come with a price tag attached. So come with day one rights, come with a better minimum wage that's based on cost of living, come with better, maternity and paternity rights. And so kind of when you think about how that bill potentially connects with the world of workplace savings, it'd be great to get a few highlights from you on what employers can expect to see from the Employment Rights Bill, but also how other moves towards financial stability might be in reach for the Labour government.
Sure. So yes, as we've heard, it's a really exciting day in my kind of policy wonk world. The Employment Rights Bill has been published. This is within the first 100 days of the new government, which was the deadline that they set themselves. The bill is part of a much broader agenda. Make Work Pay is the kind of name of the broader agenda. And as part of it, there are a number of different measures that are going to be coming down the line. So sort of following this bill, there are going to be other consultations looking at some of the slightly bigger questions around employment status and sort of other areas of kind of, I guess, technical categorization of workers where they fall. Also looking at fair pay, so looking at extending the requirement for large employers to disclose data on the pay gaps between different groups of workers. So we already have that based on gender at the moment. We have it at the moment as well for listed companies in relation to CEOs and average worker pay. But we're now going to be seeing pay gaps disclosed on the grounds of disability and for ethnic groups as well. So these are some of the changes that are coming down the line. But the bill today was very much focusing on security, yeah, and it's a really big issue for us. So for a while now, we've established a measure called the Insecure Work Index, the UK Insecure Work Index, where we measure. It's a kind of composite measure looking at financial insecurity, contractual insecurity, and employment rights. So we put together a number of different pieces that workers in the economy are experiencing, and we measure, we put that together and measure how insecure they are. And by our latest measure, there are 6.8 million people who are severely insecure, so in severely insecure work. And what we mean by that is that they have a combination of two or more factors of financial insecurity, contractual insecurity, and a lack of basic employment rights. So to give you an example of that, a worker in that situation, it might be someone on a 0 hours contract who doesn't know, how much they're going to be earning from week to week. It also could be somebody who is quite new to a job, and so they haven't earned the right to be protected from unfair dismissal yet, or kind of basic redundancy rights. The changes proposed today by the government will alter those two areas fairly significantly. So there's going to be a move to enable all workers to have a contract that reflects their actual hours of work. So this is the kind of part of the agenda that's focusing on, the ban of 0 hours contracts, as it's been called. As you will all know, it's very hard to ban something that doesn't exist in legal terms anyway. There is no such contract as a 0 hours contract. So what the government is proposing to do is to give people a right to move on to a contract that reflects their actual hours worked, based on a kind of 12-week qualifying period. So that will affect people on 0 hours. It will also affect people on low-hour contracts as well, or kind of working with quite unpredictable arrangements. So we think that will be a really big step forward and improve people's financial well-being significantly. I mean, one of the areas we've been looking at is actually the interaction between work insecurity and housing insecurity. So we've been looking at the prevalence of private renters within that group of highly insecure workers that we've found. And we found that 1.4 million people in the UK are both in severely insecure work and privately renting, which we think is a huge problem given that rents are rising very significantly at the moment. I'm sure some of you in the room will be experiencing this yourselves, but no doubt a lot of your workforce will be experiencing this. And we see this as a really key area of I guess, financial well-being going forward, looking at that interaction between wages, security of hours and pay, predictability, and then looking at the costs that you're having to sort of, cough up for. And rent is one of the really, really big ones. So we think that the government, they also have a renters reform bill as well, which you might have noticed. So there's going to be these two changes coming down the line in sync together, which we hope will lift a significant amount of people out of that severely insecure category. And maybe the second area I'll mention just briefly is the focus increasingly on workforce health. So this is something that we're very interested in at the Work Foundation. We have a long history actually of looking at workforce health from various different kind of angles and lenses. And we think a number of the measures being proposed by the government do have a kind of broader ambition in mind, which is to make working lives healthier, make them more sustainable for people over longer periods, trying to get out of this kind of cycle of sort of being in a job and then experiencing or time periods of being out of work and having to reapply, get back in, etc. And so there is going to be another paper released soon, the Get Britain Working paper, which you might have heard about in the news as well, which is the government's proposals to bring more people out of economic insecurity, some of whom are experiencing economic inactivity due to ill health, and they want to bring more of those people into the labour market. I think as part of that, something they really need to firm up is that work offers a safe, secure and sort of financially secure place to be. And some organisations are taking their hypotheses that there may be people leaving the labour market, leaving work altogether, due to ill health, but also due to the insecurity they've been experiencing whilst in work. And so there's a kind of de-risking process that needs to happen so that people are able to move from the relative security of benefits payments, whilst that means poverty for a lot of people. And I don't want to at all imply that that's a nice way to be living, but there is a certainty there, particularly if you're receiving benefits for being in ill health. There is a certainty of income and a reliability of income there, which at the moment for a lot of people in work doesn't exist. So I think a lot of this agenda needs to look at making work pay, which is the kind of headline, and focusing on the kind of financial resilience and well-being of people when they're in work as well. And that's where our kind of policy focus is very much going to be.
Thank you so much, Alice. And kind of picking on that thread of financial resilience and kind of the role of workplace savings, Sarah, I wonder if you can talk to us about some of the experience in the US, which in many ways is quite far ahead of the UK. And in fact, it was the US academic that gave the UK the inspiration for both for pensions auto-enrollment and for savings auto-enrollment. And there's some really innovative things happening, but there are also some things that maybe the US hasn't got so right. So it'd be really good to get your reflections for a minute or two on what's going on there.
Yeah, we've taken a very different path legislatively than the UK has taken. And maybe I'll start actually by reflecting on how our retirement automatic enrollment system has differed from your own. So as Emily mentions, I'm actually lucky enough to be part of this team, although they did this work long before I joined them. My team conducted a study in using data from the late 90s showing that automatic enrollment is a successful way to increase 401k participation. So in the late 90s, individual employers were starting to automatically enroll their workers into a retirement scheme. It wasn't until 2006, when the Pension Protection Act was passed, that the government officially sort of blessed this activity. But it was still telling employers they could do it, not requiring it. And it has only been with the passing of the Secure 2.0 Act in late 2022 that employers have been required to automatically enroll new employees in new 401k plans. So I sort of contrast this with the pension automatic enrollment experience, which I don't want to pretend it didn't take a lot of years of effort to get to mandatory automatic enrollment. But that's as you know, a nationwide policy that now applies to every employer. So it's, one fell swoop after the phase-in process, of course, and it's not left to employer discretion. So I think it's hard to do, but it's a really powerful way to make sure you're not missing any particularly vulnerable groups of employees. Things that we've done a little bit better more recently, the Secure 2.0 Act does include some provisions to help people get on a more stable footing in the short term. There's a provision that allows employers to automatically enroll their employees into sort of a short-term savings account that's linked to the 401k account. They can have a default contribution rate up to 3% of pay, and the balance in the account can be up to $2,500. At that point, the contributions would turn off. They're also allowing employers to allow their employees to sort of
Double allowing,
yes.
allowing to allow.
To let their employees withdraw up to £1,000 from their retirement, $1,000 from their
Turned into a Londoner in one day.
From their retirement account, as sort of a way to, in the US, our retirement account is much more liquid than your pensions. And so that's generally not a great thing. But in this context, it's a way that if you don't have any other short-term savings, you can skim off a little bit of your retirement savings to help you out of a jam. There's also a provision to help people in student loan debt start building up retirement savings contributions by letting the employer sort of count their student loan payments in an effort to get some of the employer match that they would get if they...
So they match against student loan payments, so you can keep paying down your student loan.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, your employer puts a match contribution into your 401k.
Exactly.
Really clever.
Yeah. All these things are brand new. So I think employers are getting their feet wet. I'm hopeful that there are employers starting to try all these things. I don't have any exciting data to share on which one works best or how well they're working in general. But sort of a menu of possibilities, I think, is really powerful. And hopefully 5 years from now, we'll have clear answers as sort of which ones are the most recommended. But our approach right now is all about allowing employers to allow employees to do these things, which means it's all up to the employer. And risk-averse employers are going to be very nervous to be the first ones to try this. And so that's the big downside of this approach.
Yeah, it takes a huge amount of bravery to stick your neck out as an employer and do something new. And we're incredibly grateful to Suez Bupa Co-op for doing this work and for leading the way to show that it is possible to make a difference. We have more robust, more compelling and more market-specific evidence that opt-out workplace savings is effective in the UK than we ever had for pensions auto-enrollment. Pensions auto-enrollment evidence was based on a small experiment in the US in different contexts, and we took it and we went, let's build that thing, and invested a decade in creating that engine and rolling it out. So we're in this position where we kind of have the answer. We know that we can do this. We know that people say they want to save. We know they find it hard to save. We know that they're grateful and positive when we enable that and make it easy. We help them to take action. And so Alice, having spent a long time, I'd say kind of on the inside of the machine, understanding all the different moving pieces for this new employment rights bill, do you have any words of wisdom for how we navigate, Tulip's warm words and her willingness to engage through to making something happen? Is there a key to it other than persistence?
I mean, I think there are going to be huge opportunities to be part of the consultations around this agenda, because it's really is ongoing. I mean, a lot of the changes aren't even going to kick in for a couple of years. And in that time, there's going to be, a really deep level of engagement with employers and other groups as well to work out how these changes need to land. So I think there's definitely opportunity to get this type of agenda into some very interesting conversations. And a lot of the changes span a number of departments. This is not just about the Department for Business and Trade. This is about HMRC, and this is about labour market enforcement and kind of the regulation of the rights that people are going to have. This spans health as well. So one of the changes that is underway is going to be a collective agreement for workers in the social care, adult social care sector. So I'm sure some of you will have heard of this, and there will maybe employers here who might even be part of those negotiations. But the idea is that the pay of social care workers will be set at a higher rate following negotiations between employers, the government and workers and their unions in the sector as well. And so I think there are lots of opportunities for consultation, not just in terms of changing the direction and the course of the bill itself, but actually in what might arise from it. So, those types of collective agreements could be a vehicle for other incentives and models to be added in. They're not just about pay.
Got it. So looking at what's already in flight and how we might kind of hook onto something going there. And this feels like a really, really good moment and a really opportune day with all these things happening today on the 10th of October.
Yeah.
I want to change tack a little bit, Sarah. So there's been a little bit of a thread of behavioural science throughout the day. And so we know that one of the reasons that saving is hard to do is there's just lots of friction. You have to make decisions. You have to decide what account to open. You have to decide when to move money, how much to move. You get a little bit of loss aversion. It feels quite painful to take money out of your bank account and stick it somewhere else. But there's just a huge amount of inertia getting in the way. But there's also this idea of people having different mental models about their money. And as Owen was saying this morning, if you got a lottery win versus, an inheritance, you might think about that money very differently. And one of the theories that you wanted to test going into this, specifically with Wagestream, is how does a savings balance interact with flexible pay, so the ability to get paid on demand for work you've already completed. And there was a concern that perhaps we would drive up usage of flexible pay, that would be taking savings out of people's bank balances and that they would have to resort to other ways of accessing liquidity. What did you find?
The exact opposite. We were shocked by this, but earned wage access utilization is consistent across the study arms. I think it's possible that over a very long time horizon, you would start to see a difference. But 9 months is a pretty long time. And we don't see what we were concerned about, which is that savings are higher in the opt-out arm. I guess there's two things we might have been concerned about. Savings are higher in the opt-out arm, and to finance that savings, you're tapping into flexible pay more frequently. Or you might have thought that we would see the opposite. You're building up a savings balance, and so you no longer need to use flexible pay as frequently. But that's not what happens at all. which was, I'm revealing my empathy gap a little bit, but this was really, really shocking to everybody on my team, including myself. I think we approached this from a very classical economic standpoint and thought, there's this a very fair, but there is a little fee associated with taking the flexible pay. So surely people would always prefer to tap into their savings pot if they have one instead of using earned wage access. Not what we see. We also thought, being stuck in that economist model a little bit too much sometimes, that if you were going to use flexible pay, you would take the maximum available to you. Again, not what we see. People seem to have remarkable self-constraint and they take out what they need, even if there's a lot more available to them. So this was super eye-opening for me personally, just realizing all the conversations that we've had over many years of this project. And often the room is full of people who can no longer remember what it feels like, or maybe have never experienced what it feels like to need a product like flexible pay, to need help building up a savings account. It's clear that people, even in these really tight spots, are sophisticated about their finances, and they understand the tools available to them, and they're choosing to use flexible pay in a very specific way to meet their specific needs. As I say, we'll keep seeing what the data shows over time, but I think that is what it's suggesting now, and that's a big surprise to me.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see in the data. And, I've spent a lot of years being very close to this membership, and it actually is what I expected to see. Yeah. But if you don't live and breathe it every single day of the week like I do, I can understand why it would take you by surprise, because it's not intuitive. I can see that we're nearly out of time. We could talk all day. I want to ask each of you just for one last thought for the room, either something for them to think about what they might be doing to get ready for these changes coming, or anything else you want the employers in this room to kind of hold in their heads as they leave today. Alice, I'll come to you first.
Right. Yes. So I think probably maybe consultation is my key word. So I think start talking to your workforces about these changes. I think many of you already probably will have, because there've been signals that we're heading in this direction for a while now. We've had a kind of policy vacuum on employment rights for a decade or more, and so it has. This is going to feel a bit like a step change. So talk to your workforces and bring in and really find out what it is that they need out of this kind of changed model, and you can implement it some of it upstream. You don't need to wait obviously for the legislation to change to actually start doing some of this now. There's a really nice example from Wetherspoons, an employer that I'd worked with in a previous job, who actually gave their workforce the option to either have a guaranteed hours contract or a 0 hours contract, and they reported that 99% of their staff chose the guaranteed hours contract. Which I think dispels some of the myths that, there's this huge number of people out there really wanting these 0 hours contracts, which I know for a small number they work, but I think for a lot of people, they really want that security. So I think talk to your workforces, find out what they want, and start implementing the changes now.
Okay. Consultation is your keyword. Sarah, do you have a keyword?
I'll decide at the end if I have a keyword. But I think the message I want to leave you with is that you all have a lot of power to make this better. And not just power to be trying to offer your employees different benefits, more generous benefits that can help them in this very specific way, but also the power to start changing the way that your colleagues think about this issue, the way that you relate to your employees when they come to you with a financial problem, or they come to you with stress that you think might be related to their finances. It can often be really difficult, I think, to speak up to one's colleagues or people socially when you hear them sort of betraying their empathy gap. But I think that's actually a really powerful thing that we can all do to try and move the needle just a little bit in a way that'll make these conversations easier to have down the road.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Sarah. And of course, thank you to Tulip for joining us digitally. Really appreciate your time today.